How useful are postulates in triangle congruence? Yan ang pag-uusapan natin ngayon dito sa ating matsayang talakayan. Kaya, stay tuned! Hello grade 8 learners! For today's video, we will talk about triangle congruence postulates. At the end of this video, you will learn how to illustrate the SAS, ASA, and SSS congruence postulates together with the AAS congruence theorem. Let's have a simple recall on the parts of the triangle. In triangle ABC, which is the included angle of sides AB and AC? If you answered angle A, then you are correct. Which is the included angle of sides AB and BC? If you answered angle B, then you are correct. And number 3, which is the included angle of sides BC and AC? Correct. It is angle C. Again, an included angle is an angle common to two sides. Let's say angle B is the common angle between side AB and side BC. So another is, which is the included side of angle A and angle B? If you answered side AB, then you are correct. Which is the included side of angle A and angle C? The correct answer is side AC. And which is the included side of angle B and angle C? Your answer is correct. It is BC. An included side is a side common to two angles. So let's say side AB is common to angle A and angle B. We also have discussed congruent triangles. In the previous video, we have learned that triangles are congruent if and only if the corresponding angles and the corresponding sides are congruent. Let us also recall that a postulate is a statement that is accepted as true without proof. With the help of triangle congruence postulate, we can show that the two triangles are congruent. Using the SSS congruence postulate, SAS congruence postulate, ASA congruence postulate, and additionally, AAS congruence theorem. The SSS congruence postulate. Bakit SSS? The 3S stands for the three sides of a triangle. The SSS congruence postulate states that if three sides of one triangle are congruent to three sides of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. Ibig sabihin, by SSS congruence postulate, ang dalawang triangle ay magiging congruent kapag yung kanilang corresponding sides ay congruent. For example, using the figure, makikita natin that using tick marks, we can show the corresponding congruent sides. So, if side MN congruent to QR, side NP congruent to RS, and side PM congruent to side SQ, then we can now say that the two triangles are congruent. So triangle MPN is now congruent to triangle QRS by SSS Congruence Postulate. So, pansinin natin mabuti that the three corresponding sides of the two triangles are congruent. That's why the two triangles are congruent by SSS Congruence Postulate. Now, let us show that triangle MAT is congruent to triangle THM. Kung mapapansin natin, the whole figure is in a parallelogram form. So, meron lang tayong diagonal na empty para magkaroon tayo ng dalawang triangles. And these two triangles are congruent. So, ano-ano yung kanyang mga corresponding parts? So, since this is a parallelogram form, we can have that the opposite sides are congruent. So, let's say MA corresponds to TH. And MA is congruent to TH. Another is AT congruent to MH. Okay? And we have MT congruent to MT. Okay? So we can now say that triangle MAT is congruent to triangle THM by SSS Congruence Postulate. So, meaning, kapag gamit natin ang mga postulate, hindi na natin kailangan isulat pa lahat ng mga 6 na corresponding parts ng dalawang triangle. Using the given postulate, then we can say that the two triangles are congruent. Next is we have the SAS Congruence Postulate. Ano ba ang ibig sabihin ng SAS? So we have side, angle, side. Meaning that if two sides and the included angle of one triangle are congruent to two sides and included angle of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. Okay, kaya kanina, we have our activity regarding the included angle and the included side. Kasi ito nga ay magagamit natin in the congruence postulates. Okay. For example, let us show that triangle PQS and triangle WXY are congruent by SAS Congruence Postulate. As you can see, PQ corresponds to WX. So we can say that PQ is congruent to WX. Angle Q corresponds to angle X. So we can say that angle Q is congruent to angle X. And SQ corresponds to XY. So we can say that QS is congruent to XY. And take note that angle Q is the included angle of PQ and SQ. And angle X is the included angle of WX and XY. So, from the given illustration and conditions, we have here the corresponding congruent sides, the corresponding congruent angles or angles which are the included angles, and another corresponding sides. So we can say that triangle PQS is congruent to triangle WXY by SAS Congruence Postulate. Now, using the figure, so we are going to show that the two triangles are congruent. With the tick marks and mark, we can write the corresponding congruent parts. So let's say OD is congruent to VD, and angle ODC is congruent to angle VDI by vertical angles. So, dito, hindi natin pwedeng gamitin yung single letter lang to name the angle. Kasi nga, angle D is shared by the two triangles. Ibig sabihin, may angle D yung unang triangle natin at meron ding angle D yung pangalawang triangle. That's why it is better for us to use 3 letters in naming the angle. So we have their angle ODC and angle VDI. And take note that angle ODC is the included angle between OD and CD. And angle VDI is the included angle of VD and VI. Then, we also have CD congruent to ID. Now, is this already enough to say that the two triangles are congruent? Yes, of course. So triangle ODC is now congruent to triangle VDI by SAS congruence postulate. Another postulate, so we have the ASA postulate. This means angle, side, angle. It states that if two angles and the included side of one triangle are congruent to two angles and included side of another triangle, then the two triangles are congruent. So let us now show that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF. In the figure, we have there the arcs and tick marks showing the corresponding congruent parts. So we can now say that angle A is congruent to angle D. Then we have AC congruent to DF. And angle C congruent to angle F. And take note that AC is the included side of angle A and angle C. And we have side DF, which is the included side of angle D and angle F. Now, we can say that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DEF by ASA congruence postulate. Now, with the given information, we are going to show that triangle LEO is congruent to triangle VEO by putting tick marks or arcs on the congruent parts. So let's start with angle LEO and angle VEO. Angle LEO is congruent to angle VEO. Then we have side OE congruent to side OE by reflexive property. And we also have angle LOE congruent to angle VOE. So in the given figure, we have there angle, included side, angle. On the second triangle, angle, included side, angle. So we can now say that triangle LEO is congruent to triangle VEO by ASA congruence postulate. To show that the two triangles are congruent, we can also use the AAS congruence theorem or the angle-angle side. It states that if two angles and non-included side of one triangle are congruent to two angles and non-included side of another triangle, then the triangles are congruent. So let us consider the given figure. With the tick marks and arcs, we can say that angle A is congruent to angle D. Then, angle C congruent to angle F. And side BC congruent to side EF. Remember that BC is non-included side of the first triangle. And EF is also the non-included side. So we can now say that triangle ABC and triangle DEF are congruent by AAS congruence theorem. Now let us see how far have you learned with our discussion. You are going to determine the postulate used to show that each pair of triangles are congruent. In the given figure, what postulate or theorem can we use to show that the two triangles are congruent? If you answered SAS, then you are correct. How about on this figure? Is it SSS, SAS, ASA, or AAS? If you answered SSS, then you are correct. Next figure, is it SSS, SAS, ASA, or AAS congruence theorem? The answer is ASA congruence postulate. On the next figure, is it SSS, SAS, ASA, or AAS? The correct answer is AAS congruence theorem. Good job, grade 8. So let's try another one. What is the additional information required to show ASA postulate? So we have there angle K congruent to angle U, angle L congruent to angle T. What corresponding parts is missing to show that the two triangles are congruent using ASA postulate? The correct answer is KL congruent to UT. Let's try another one. How can we show that the SSS postulate is used in this figure? What additional information is required? If you answered XY congruent to XY, then you are correct. Next, to show SAS postulate, what additional information is required? So, the correct answer is RS congruent to UT. That's correct. Now, let us try this one. We have to complete the statement using the figure. Triangle PNO is congruent to what triangle? If you answered triangle PNQ, then you are correct. By what congruence postulate? Yes, that's correct. By SAS congruence postulate. How about on this figure? Triangle HIK is congruent to what triangle? If you answered triangle JIK, then you are correct. By what postulate? Yes, by ASA congruence postulate. Let's try another. We're going to complete the statement. If we have triangle ABD, congruent to what triangle? The correct answer is triangle CBD. By what congruence postulate? The correct answer is by SSS congruence postulate. And now it's your turn. Get your pen and paper and do this activity. Using the given information, illustrate the congruent triangles, name the congruent triangles, and determine the postulate being used. If angle V is congruent to angle F, UV is congruent to EF, and angle U is congruent to angle E. And that's for today, guys. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and share. Again, this is Teacher Dali na nagsasabing, practice makes perfect. Thanks for watching!